Good morning and welcome to our daily devotional from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn. Very glad to have you with us on this Wednesday morning, October the 4th, 2023, as we continue our look at the Decalogue, or 10 Commandments as they're called, in chapter 20 of the book of Exodus. Yesterday, we reviewed the first two commandments covered in verses 1 through 4. And now we're going to read the next two commandments, commandments 3 and 4, from verses 7 through 9. So this is Exodus chapter 20, 7 through 9. I'll offer a couple of reflections and then close us with prayer. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. Well, these are fairly well-known commandments, though there, I think, are some prominent misunderstandings, especially in commandment number 3. Often, and I remember in my own upbringing, I was taught that this third commandment really had to do with, it was described as using God's name in vain, and usually associated with cursing, using God's name to curse. I really don't think that is the primary meaning of this text. In fact, I think that this text is the foundation for Jesus being so hard on religious people in the New Testament. He came down, as you know, very hard on the Pharisees, who, by the way, were quite a devout group. I mean, they really were, for the most part, very genuine in their devotion and wanting to follow the law and to be pleasing to God. And Jesus came down hard on this group, I think, primarily because of this third commandment, which is to be careful that you don't make wrongful use of the name of God. It is a caution for us to be careful in invoking God's name for our own purposes and our own designs. Unfortunately, I think we find this a lot in politicians. In fact, Machiavelli, the Italian philosopher, famously advised princes to appear religious, even if they weren't religious. And we often find politicians who are wanting to post the 10 Commandments, for example, in all the schools and public buildings. And this appears to me to be an attempt to use God's name for purposes that do not actually align with God's will or God's purposes. So the name of God, the name of a name is something that's very closely associated with presence and power and appearance of that which is named. And so using the Lord's name for your own purposes is strongly prohibited in the 10 Commandments. Ironically, it's the next commandment that is fairly explicitly violated by most legislatures and many other government functions that are open on the Sabbath day, that is, whether you recognize the Sabbath as Saturday or Sunday. And so the strict keeping of this commandment is not really held to in our culture. But I'm not as concerned about strictness in terms of which day of the week. I think the strictness here applies to the importance of rest. That the importance, whatever day it is that you find your rest, it's very important that you find rest, that this is blessed by God. There's a kind of, there's a sort of reflection that You're not supposed to be constantly in the mode of manipulating and controlling life and all of its various manifestations in your own life, but rather to take some time and simply rest, to not do anything, as it were, but especially not to work. So a focus on Sabbath living is actually a focus on making sure that you get plenty of rest. You'll notice there's no mention of worship here. We often associate worship with Sabbath, but the commandment actually doesn't mention worship. It simply says that we are to rest because the Lord rested on the seventh day. Let's close with this word of prayer from W.E. Orchard. O God, who dwells in light unapproachable and full of glory, why do we often dwell in darkness and in the shadow of death? The shadows of night, which so quickly veil the glory of the day, are not as heavy as those that rest upon our hearts. We are here for a moment, like a bird that flashes from the darkness through the light, back to darkness once again. And even here, as we pause a while, the shadows creep upon us. They rest upon those we love. They rest upon those into whose eyes we look. They rest upon ourselves. We cannot understand the brevity of life or its fragility. We are just learning how to work, just catching some glimpse of its meaning, a sudden call, and we are gone. We cannot understand why such pain of body, heart, and mind should sadden many of our days. We cannot understand why we should bring upon ourselves misery and make tragic failures of our lives or suffer eternal loss. Is it, O God, that we see these shadows because the dayspring from on high has visited us? That these pains are the feelings of those who wake from the stupor of death? That the darkness broods upon our hearts because we have turned our backs to thee and hidden ourselves from thy light? Give us the grace, the daring, the desire to turn again, that we may see thy face. Amen. Thank you for joining me this morning from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn, and I hope that you have a very good day. Goodbye.